and welcome to the If They Can Do It podcast, the podcast that interviews absolutely ordinary people who do extraordinary things and wants you walking away thinking, hey, if they can do it, so can I. And this week, my friends, this week is really... it's another example of why I started this podcast. I think when you look around at the friends that you have and you look around at the people who you've spent time with, who you've done life with for a long time, and I even think, wow, how long have I done life with this person? We've known each other, I want to say at least like 4 or 5 years, and it's crazy the growth that I've seen in this individual. She is strong, she is smart, she is very, very capable. She is ambitious in all the good ways that just doesn't smell. We all know those people who are like weird ambitious. She is not that kind of ambitious. She is ambitious because honestly, she wants to leave a legacy for other people and help other people. And when I meet individuals like that, I need them in my life. And so without further ado, Bianca, how's it going?
You said so many great things about me. I have a lot to live up to.
Well, you already have. And that's kind of the exciting part is,
Thank you.
I mean, all of that is just based off of what I've seen and what I've known about you. And has it been 5 years?
Yeah.
What year did we
5
start
years in
working together?
October. 2018. So yeah, 5 years.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's
I
weird.
know. Time flies.
Wow. And a lot has changed. Like, how have you changed in that time?
Yeah.
I could say like the growth I've seen in you, but how do you feel during that
Right.
time?
So 5 years ago, I was 22 and I was in college trying to figure my life out to now actually stepping into my career. So it's been a journey. So much has happened within that time frame. And like even just thinking back, like who I was 5 years ago is completely different than who I am now.
Yeah.
My mindset, physically, just mentally, spiritually, even is mind blowing, very mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, if you don't mind like sharing, like what do you do, like mindset, like how have you grown and
Yeah.
in that way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, we talked about this before, just like going through the struggle of like, what am I here to do on this
Hmm.
earth?
Hmm.
Especially when you're in college, you're just really kind of boggled by the idea of like, I need to figure this out. I need to
Yeah.
figure out my career. I need to figure out what I need to be doing. Like, am I doing enough? Am I not? So I would struggle with that a lot when I was younger. And even now, like, I think I'm at a point where I do still struggle with that, but I'm able to find outlets and find the answers. So, for instance, like my career, right? I think
Mhm.
for years I was debating like, what should I do? What should I do? And I would do this thing where I would put myself in a box and I would play very small because it was safe. So I think now that I am where I am now, I'm just taking all the risk in the world. I'm like, I have nothing to lose. And if it doesn't work out, it will work out.
Yeah.
And we always find our way. And that's like the mentality change that I have now is like, if that doesn't work out, okay, re recenter and like reshift and like what do we need to do going forward. um Back then I was just like, well, if that doesn't work out, I'm going to be devastated, so I don't want to do that, so I'm going to stay
Yeah.
here and I'm just going to do this. So I feel like I did the same thing for too long to the point where I was kind of sick of my own stuff, and I was like, I need something different, I need something new, I need to take the risk that I've said I've always wanted to take.
Yeah. And isn't it,
So
it
yeah.
isn't it funny, like, because you were talking about putting yourself in a box when you were younger, and
Yeah.
say you were younger, you're talking younger, like 22. I played that game until 30, so good on you, doing that. But I mean, it's so funny because
Yes.
we think of sometimes as you were talking, I was
Mhm.
thinking like putting yourself in a box isn't always like, I'm going to play in a field where like I'm crushing it, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
always it. It's just a place where you feel comfortable, even though you might not be doing well, right? So if you're in a
Hmm.
job that you know that you're
Yeah.
doing well, but like you're like, I know I can play here, and you have all this ambition and you're trying to move up and promotion, but you keep hitting a wall. Sometimes when you're
Yeah.
not doing what you're supposed to be doing, that's why you keep hitting a wall. And that's why is because you're not
Hmm.
operating where you need to be operating. And it can be
Right.
dangerous because you kind of live life going like, okay, like what do you want from me then? Like, I
Hmm.
know I can do this, and you keep telling me no. What am I doing wrong? Why even in this smaller box where I feel comfortable, can't I crush
Right.
it? And that could be, I mean, that could be really hard. That could even be worse mentally than the failure of like actually trying to do what you're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. I think I've hit a lot of walls in my career, like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, well, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And then sometimes it takes like asking for help,
Yeah.
and I think that's where me being prideful, like me being who I am, like I wouldn't ask for help until I had this amazing mentor that just like broke the shell. Took him a while to break the shell, but once he broke the shell, like man, the amount of things I learned, like the vulnerability that it took to break that wall down and say, like, I need help because what I'm doing isn't working.
Mhm.
I'm consistently trying to reevaluate and reevaluate, and it's not working. And sometimes you really need that outside perspective to push you into those directions. And like we've even had breakthrough conversations when you came up to me one time. You're like, "Hey, have you tried this
Mhm.
part or this industry? Have you tried going into this position?" I'm just like, man, I never like saw myself there. But then you're like, well, you have these skill sets that match, and it's knowing that you have these transferable skill sets that you can take in so many places, and it doesn't
Uh-huh.
have to be in that one spot. And that's like the hardest thing to accept sometimes, like me going into real estate now, thinking of like all the skill sets I've built in tech that I can really take to the real estate market. I'm just like, man, like it's almost the same thing but just a different knowledge base that I have to work on.
Yeah. So what's probably been the biggest takeaway then in terms of self awareness? Because I feel like, right now
Mm.
with the job market and it being so competitive and even just in life in
Yeah.
general, right? We kind of undersell like, no, I just do what I do. Like I do what they
Mhm.
pay me to do, that we don't really a lot of times understand the skills that we have and put value on our strengths of like, no, like I do contribute something to whatever I'm at, whether
Right.
that's at work, my family,
Mhm.
what's been your biggest learn about yourself in being vulnerable and in this like change that you've had in your life?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. And I think like self-awareness is like a continued learning experience. Because I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that like I like to operate in high stressed environments, which is very unhealthy. But if I feel like if I'm not super stressed, I'm not doing enough,
Oh, wow.
and that's like a really like that's something I'm still trying to overcome and like come to realize like, man, like that's not true. Like being stressed actually doesn't help me, it makes me operate at a lower capacity than what I'm doing. So I think that is like the biggest learn that I've had. And like the hardest thing to admit is that like I like to be stressed out and I like a miserable life. I don't know. But that's like the worst thing that I've learned about myself. And I'm just like, man, like now that I know this, like, how do I take that and understand, like, okay, I'm stressed. Like, what do I need to do? And like, why am I stressed? And am I actually operating at the capacity that I can be operating at? Um, but yeah, like if I'm not constantly busy or stressed, like for some reason, something in me tells me like, oh, you're not doing enough and you should be doing more. It's
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean and I actually I relate to that. I relate to that a ton because there are times when I get a lot of work done, but I'm not exhausted, or like maybe I was like, but like then I took this break, you know, and I don't feel like, I could have not
Mhm.
taken a break. Would Kobe have taken a break? Would like blah, blah, blah. Like you just start thinking, you know, in these ways,
Yeah.
and I don't know where that, when you were talking about being stressed, I don't know where that comes from in me, where I feel stress.
Mhm.
I very rarely do feel stress, actually. Um, and that's not always a
That's
good thing,
good.
because there are some things when I should,
Mhm.
because I don't recognize when things are out of
Mm.
whack sometimes until I'm over my head. And I should have asked
Mm.
for help
Wow.
earlier because I didn't feel stress about it. And I'm not sure if
Yeah.
that's like, I guess it could be procrastination, but not really, because it's not really, I'm not really putting anything off when I don't. But wow, like
Mhm.
that actually does help me, where it's like, oh, okay, so stress isn't
Yeah.
the goal. Feeling anxious isn't necessarily, you know, the goal.
Mhm.
So what if feeling stress isn't the goal of what you're doing, then what is? Like, how do you know you're in a good spot?
Right. And it's something that I'm like even now I'm still trying to
Yeah.
figure out like okay like if I'm not stressed like what is the feeling that I'm after or like
Mm,
what makes me feel like I'm actually accomplishing something. And like I was reading this thing that was talking about how like when you start your own business or you're starting a new career, you're starting anything in life, like the feelings of being anxious, the feelings of being nervous, the feelings of fear are natural feelings,
mm-hmm,
right? And I think for a long time I've always pursued the idea of feeling excited
mm-hmm,
about something and feeling excited about that promotion, feeling excited about that job, feeling excited about like that new car or something. But all of that is so temporary, right? So
mm-hmm,
I have to embrace feeling anxious, I have to embrace feeling that level of fear, that level of nervousness. But what helps me through that, what I've noticed is my support system.
mm-hmm,
So I've really worked on this past year is building this support system of people and I lived in California this past year and I was by myself. I didn't know anybody. And I relied heavily on the people that cared about me. And
mm-hmm,
it helped me realize who that was. So that helped me build that support system. And it fast tracked it for me, I think, for some people, because when you move, that's when you realize like who's really your friend and who's really there
mm-hmm.
for you and who's checking up on you. Um, but it's natural to feel those things, it's natural to feel nervous, it's natural to be afraid. That's when they say when you're uncomfortable is when you're growing, right? So I know that I am growing. But sometimes I have to sit back and reflect, like, okay, let me talk to my support system and like tell them how I'm feeling. And a lot of the times, the people who watch you closely are the ones that are able to see your progress.
Mm-hmm.
Even when it's not us, like, you mentioned it, like, man, like I've seen you grow, and it's like, dang, like that's the validation that I am doing something, that
Mm-hmm.
I am moving forward. And sometimes it doesn't come within because we're so hard on ourselves,
Yeah.
and that's really natural. I'm very hard on myself, and I do want to do better, and I want to create legacy, right? And sometimes it feels like you're not doing enough, but having a support system to encourage you and to put you kind of like push you back into the lane, when you're
Mm-hmm.
lane switching, like, no, get back in your lane, like you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even just having that support system around, uh, around you, or having, not being alone. And that doesn't mean like being in a
Hmm.
relationship, but just like people around you,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Is so important. I mean, I know you were talking about spiritually, both you and I are Christians. And I was
Yeah.
listening to a book. I was running and listening to a book. And what's funny is the person was talking about Genesis. And
Hmm.
they made the point that, isn't it funny that the Bible calls being alone bad before calling sin bad, chronologically? That it wasn't
Oh
good
wow.
for Adam to be alone even before sin came and any of that happened. That was the first thing that was called not good. And
Wow.
so, like, that, just the importance of community, the importance of
Hmm.
being with, a group of people who know you, who like really know
Hmm.
you, and will tell you, because sometimes you don't realize that you're drifting. right?
Right.
But they have to
Yeah.
know, like nobody else would probably notice if you were drifting if they didn't know you, right? Those people who just
Mhm.
kind of know that you're a little bit off. And I mean, even when I say that I've watched you grow, and I've just kind of seen you do it. You've always been a hard worker. You've always been a person who prides yourself on that, right? That was never a worry. You're never going to be somebody who's going to be lazy, young or
Yeah.
going forward. Like that's just not going to happen. But there
Mhm.
was this sense of like needing the validation from other people of your work, and needing, like, wanting the
Yeah.
promotion of your work as a way of, like, exactly what we were talking about, that next thing, right? I worked really hard.
Mhm.
What's the next thing? I worked really hard. What's the next thing? And
Mhm.
it was, I could see that in you, that was the most important thing. But
Mhm.
knowing you now, it's like, okay, you're so much more comfortable just being you and understanding what you want from the working hard versus like what you want being other people's validation of it. And I've
Right.
seen that
Yeah.
shift in the years. So I'd much rather be like, oh, I'd much rather like tell you what I've seen versus be like, oh, you've grown so much, and let it be
Mhm.
just out there. So I'm extremely proud
Right.
of you for that. Like it's been amazing to watch, seriously.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. Tears.
And,
Every time.
no,
So,
it's okay. It's okay. You could. They can't hear you. I'm not hearing tears. It's all
right.
good. It's all good. No,
No, but I really appreciate that because I do feel like I feel that shift within me now that like now I don't really care what people think anymore, and it's more of like I'm taking the risk that makes sense for me. I think it's so easy for us, like, and here's the thing is that like our support system now versus even my support system back then are completely different. And understanding the voices that influenced me back then versus the voices that are influencing me now
mm-hmm,
are a complete shift.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes we let outside influences, you know, put us in like this path that we think makes sense because so many people are saying it. And I think that's why I always played at a smaller level, because I had opportunities back then, and I'm thinking now, I'm like, man, why didn't I take that opportunity? I was just so scared,
mm-hmm,
and I didn't realize that being scared was not a bad thing
mm-hmm,
in that moment, right? That was my gut feeling saying, you're going to do something that is completely new, different, and uncomfortable. But my body, my brain couldn't communicate that to be a good thing. My mind couldn't understand that. And now that I've grown, I realized that when you have that gut feeling, that's normally a great feeling.
mm-hmm.
And that's your intuition telling you to do it, to try it. And then I've also noticed that that feeling that you have in your chest is usually the feeling you know, of you telling like your body telling you that this is probably not the best thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
So even just understanding, like, going back to like the spiritual growth is like understanding your body because your body will always feel these things before your brain can comprehend what is being felt.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I've been focusing so much on that mind body connection and realizing that these feelings of like fear or anxiousness don't always have to be a bad thing, and just understanding when it is and when it isn't, and trial and error, right? Everything's trial and error, and that's how we learn lessons. But I think out of trial and error of like turning down those opportunities back then to now taking advantage of those now has made me realize like what those feelings mean in my body.
Yeah. So what made you take the risk now to do, I mean, you're doing real estate now,
Yeah.
and like
Mhm.
that risk of, I mean, that's a lot of time, a lot of work,
Mhm.
and always the
Yeah.
chance that something doesn't work out. Nothing's guaranteed, right?
Mhm.
What made you finally just go, okay, this is something I'm gonna take a risk on this and see.
Yeah, I think it kinda, dates back to, before I left to California. I feel like that was a risk in itself too, like,
Hmm.
moving by myself, being away from my family. I've never done that before. And taking that risk made me realize that I could do anything. If I could be on my own somewhere else and still make it still thrive, I knew that I could take a risk anywhere.
Hmm.
So when I took that leap from, tech to real estate, doing again a business that requires so much work, you're constantly working. I've always wanted to do it, and it was one of those itches that, like, if I didn't ever take that risk at one point in my life, I would regret it.
Hmm.
So I had to see this way through. I had to see this path through, and I kept putting it in the back burner. Like, I had been in the real estate game since I was like 19 years old.
Hmm.
So it was like one of those things like, why do I keep picking this safe route versus doing this thing that I've been wanting to do forever?
And what
And I
was
was
the
like, I have
answer to
nothing to
that?
lose.
What was the answer to that? Why did you pick the safe route?
Um, because I was scared and I didn't know that being scared wasn't necessarily a bad thing.
Okay.
Like, I
Okay.
just picked the safe route because I was like, oh, it's guaranteed. Like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
make this income. I'm gonna make this, like, it makes sense. Everyone around me is doing, everyone around me has like a regular job. Like, no one's ever picked a career like real estate
Hmm.
and has gone on their own and built their like brand, build their business. Like, I hadn't seen that firsthand. So I was just scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. Do you, so your support system, with your family and everything like that, without having that example,
Mhm.
everybody is supportive and everything like that with it?
Yeah, my support system is smaller.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so my family, I think in some sense, like, is proud of me taking these leaps of faith, right?
Hmm.
These leaps of like taking this risk. I think they've seen me as that risk taker. But in a sense, I know that in the back of their heads, they're like, well, it might not work out, you know?
Uh-huh.
But that's okay. And that's okay. Like I said, being the first to do something like that is hard, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to work out.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But yeah, like, my support system now is very supportive of those decisions. Of course, like, everyone brings up their concerns, but I don't let that deteriorate my view on it, because I still think that there's so much to learn. And like, being in real estate, I feel like you have to be in it for a few years to really like, um, build that brand and be successful. So
Hmm.
I'm willing to take that time, and invest in it and invest in myself. Like, because what I'm doing is betting on myself. I'm betting that, like, I can make this work and I can make this happen.
Hmm.
And I rather bet on myself than bet on somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. That's there's a lot. There's a lot there. Because with you saying, the few years and being able to do that, I'm not sure with the way that things move now, with how quickly things move, that people have a
Mhm.
concept of, when you take a risk, you're signing up for something that is like action plus time, repeated action plus
Yeah.
time, and, success plus time, failure plus time, and just consistency in general. And
Mhm.
I think the prize, whatever we think that prize is, almost becomes bigger than that perspective of time, of consistency. And there needs to be like this magic thing that will make whatever work. And who was it? I forget what comedian I was talking to, and or not talking to,
Mhm.
but I was like, yeah, I was talking to them. I was listening to a podcast that they were on, and he was
Mhm.
saying like, yeah, like I blew up over the past year, but I've been doing comedy for 10 years.
Yeah.
Before that, like there's no such thing as an overnight success. And I think that
Mhm.
that's a value that um not a lot of people understand. And even if you
Mhm.
do hit success, you're never fully in control, and all of that could be taken away in a
Yeah.
moment too.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned all of that, because it kind of dates me back to like the conversations I was having when I was at the studio. And someone was said, like, you almost have to be crazy to do what we do, you know?
Mhm.
And to really think that like we can be successful in such a competitive market, and bet on ourselves, and do all these things that we're doing. And I like looked at it and I was like, dang, like he's right. Like it's it's almost like a crazy mentality, because I think for so long the reason I chose the safe route was because of the instant gratification,
Mm-hmm.
right? The instant check, the
Mm-hmm.
instant, like, you know, these things came so quick. Whereas like real estate, like I don't know when I'm going to reap these benefits, where I'm going to see the fruits of my labor, right? Like that can take time. And that's where like every single day what you do matters. And that's kind of something that I've been, coming to the exception, is like I'm gonna be working so many hours that are probably not gonna be accounted for right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting paid for a lot of the things that
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing, but it's like it's that mentality that you have to keep going and keep going, and it's gonna work out. It's gonna work out, and eventually it will.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, there's there's a couple of things in what you said that I'm just like, yeah, the whole idea of like doing things and not having instant fruit from it.
Mhm.
Like fruit doesn't happen instantly. So like I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
understand why we expect like fruits of our labor to happen, instantly
Right away.
there. And that principle I think is very healthy, where it's like, well, what if something fails? Well, what if something, and this is even outside of business, like what if somebody takes advantage of you? Like we were talking about,
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about charity, right? And well,
Mhm.
what if you give, something to somebody and they end up doing whatever with it, right? And
Mm.
it's like, well, like what they do isn't what I can control, right? It's what's
Right.
in my hand, and if I know that I'm supposed to do X, Y, or Z, then I need to do, X, Y, or
Mhm.
Z, and then the consequences are the consequences. But I know that I
Right.
was supposed to do that.
Mhm.
My little brother, probably one of the like you have siblings, like they could make you cry with like
Yeah.
things. Are you the youngest?
Mhm. I am the second youngest, so I have two older brothers and one younger.
Okay. So this will be a big deal then, because younger.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
my younger brother, we were at, this was years ago. We were at church, and around Christmas, the church that we were at, it was like a college, like a college ministry that met on Friday nights. And he was not in college. He's 11 years younger than me, but
Mhm.
I didn't have time to drop him down at his friends. So he was pissed that like I didn't drop him down at his friends.
Ooh.
I made him go to church, right? And like that was,
Mhm.
he was mad. But then every year around Christmas time, they would do something for a nonprofit in the city, or just like a nonprofit.
Mm.
And they were doing something this year, that particular year, for an organization called Souls for Souls, and they would give food, or not food, shoes to people who didn't have shoes. In other countries.
Mhm.
And so they had been promoting it. Hey, remember to bring your shoes, blah, 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 blah. We're going to donate it. We're going to do
Mhm.
it. And that week they were collecting them, and it was like a high, like the stage was like high, like if you think about like high school theater stage,
Okay.
like lifted like that.
That's
And
pretty
literally
cool.
the entire length of the stage was like shoes from the ground to the lip of the stage. Like people were just coming and giving shoes. And my
Wow.
little brother, like, I'm just kind of watching it and they're playing music or whatever. And my little brother, like, grabs me and he goes, hey, because I don't know why, but I feel like I'm supposed to give my shoes. And I was like, oh, okay. He goes, no, but I'm
Mhm.
wrestling because, like, these are my only shoes. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, like, because he was going through a growth spurt. And so my mom had
Yeah.
just spent $100 on these shoes because they were the only ones. They were literally the only ones that fit him at the time, and he had
Yeah.
just gotten them the week before, and he like wanted these shoes. He goes, I feel like I'm supposed to give these shoes. And so I told him, like, get out of the auditorium, get away from like the emotion of like there's this big pile of shoes and like all that kind of stuff. You need to get out
Yeah.
of there, have a moment with yourself, and realize if this is really something that you need to do. And he gave away
Mhm.
his shoes. And
Wow.
afterwards he goes, you know what? He goes, I figured, and keep in mind, if I'm college age, I'm 22, which means he's like 12-ish, 11, 12-ish. Okay, at
Wow.
the time. And so this is a kid who is saying this. He goes, I left and I just knew I was supposed to do it. And so I gave them, and whatever consequences mom has for me, I'll accept the consequences. And like
Oh
like
my gosh.
did that, and I've just like going like "Wah," right
Yeah, I just heard that.
like like he
That is crazy.
it's just like it's nuts, but that's exactly what you're
Yeah.
talking about, right? Like if you feel like you're supposed to do something, and this is why having your community, like your community who knows that you have your best interest at heart, who you can be completely transparent with, who know your strengths, who know your weaknesses, and all of that is there, right? You have all of that intact. You could go to them and go, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. And they
Yeah.
can, based on what they know of your priorities, based on what they know of your skills, go, you know what, like, yeah, you need to go for that. Like you need
Mhm.
to do it. You might be scared, you might be, but you need to go for that. Just like with my little brother, I was like, you know what, get out of the sanctuary, have a moment, and if you feel like you need to do it, do it. That's a lot of what that those people around you can provide you, and it's invaluable because you can get wrapped up in emotion. You could make a foolish decision, and my
Mhm.
mind just automatically goes to relationships, where it's like
Yeah.
it's like bro, really her? Like real bro. No. No, like you need it's kind of like that though, but sometimes it's like with
Yeah.
business, sometimes it's, doing this, moving, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have to have that circle, and you have to have the people who you give. Usually I have like one or two people I can in
Yeah.
my life who have veto power,
Mhm.
who I
Mhm.
trust with veto power, where if they're like, that is not the right decision, I won't do it.
Yeah.
And
And that's good.
it's a big deal. It's a big, big deal to do that, but you need to. I mean, it keeps you humble. To
Yeah.
trust somebody that much. Not a lot of people have that, so I'm very grateful to have that. But it takes fostering, and it
Mhm.
takes seeking it out, and it takes like asking for help. That's one thing that I love that you talked about too, is asking for help.
Yeah. Man, you like literally like hit so many things on the nail because like just like you, like there's only a couple people that will, veto me out of things, right? And one of them is my brother, and he's been such an essential like person and just idol in my life of like just a life coach really. Like I think
Hmm.
of him as that because I'll present to him like this and this, and he's not the type to like be like no. He's like, okay, like let's consider the everything, let's consider the pros, let's consider the cons, let's sit down and do this. So he doesn't necessarily tell me what to do, but he presents to me like these are the consequences.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that? Are you okay with this risk? And like he's really been that person to help me through that and navigate those emotions. And I'm just like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna sleep on it. And I'm like, and then I end up going back, okay, I'm like, cool, I ended up doing this. And like he's just super supportive, and I'm very grateful that that person is my family, is like my bloodline. So that's someone that I keep forever, we're
Hmm.
stuck forever. So I'm really grateful for it and grateful that I trust someone like that.
Yeah. I think so
Mm.
few people can say that they have that,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
invaluable. I think so few
Mhm.
people have that person.
Mhm. This is so true. And like so few people have like even people like you. I mentioned it yesterday. I was like, man, like I think I've gone through life and like even just like, working at Apple, like I've met so many great people, and like you are definitely that great person. Like you stand out so much, like the conversations we have, the impact you've had on the people. And like that goes to show like with the conversation we had, just this past week of like, oh yeah, I talked to this person and I was saying hi, and like they were just ranting about like how great Isaac is. And it's so true. Like you don't come across those people, and like when you're younger you think that you're going to have all these great connections just to realize as you get
Hmm.
older that like these connections you come across a few times in your lifetime.
Hmm.
So when you find them, you gotta hold on to them, not choke them out and squeeze them, but
Hmm.
like hold on to them to the point where like you're fostering that relationship, you're pouring into each other, and you're watering those plants.
Yeah, and it's so important. I mean, it's so important now more than ever because, and I'm even just thinking about this as we're talking. And part of it, it's kind of funny with real estate, with you being in real estate too. But I mean, like the fact that we're able to move as easily as we can now. Other like, if you think about the ability to move across country or like planes, like
Mhm.
hop on a plane and be in Florida or hop on the
Yeah.
plane and be in Europe, that hasn't been
Mhm.
around very long in the history of humanity. And so the ability
Yeah.
to like leave your family, leave the community that you've been in is very unnatural when we talk about it in the course of history, of all human history. And you can't expect
Yeah.
over the course of 100 years that we automatically know how to deal with that. You know, where if you grew up in
Mhm.
a town, you were in a town and that's where you grew up. And so
Mhm.
you knew people, your kids
That's
grew
it.
together, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And so you have to be even more deliberate when you're fostering these relationships because people do move. Like things change
Mhm.
and somebody you grew up with now lives across the country when that wasn't the case. And I think we do see the
Yeah.
impacts of that where people, you know, particularly like the generation that's coming up, like nothing has been consistent their entire lives. You know, like
Jeez, that's
I've heard like one in four kids grow up in a single parent household. So it's like even the sense of family isn't
wow.
consistent. And if you can't trust
Mhm.
family, how are you going to trust somebody to be your mentor and veto your life decisions, you know? And that I mean that has a
Wow.
way bigger impact than I think we talk about or give credit to.
Jeez. That was deep. That was so deep. That was so deep. But it's so true. Like when you start putting numbers to it, like statistics of like 1 in 4 children grow up in a single parent household. And I was actually talking about this other day with like people like with someone at the gym. I was just talking about it, and we were just like, they're like, "Oh, your parents divorced?" I'm like, "Yeah, yours?" Like, "Oh, yeah." Like, you more than likely are gonna meet someone who doesn't have a cohesive household, or like grew up in a household where you were with one parent, or your parents aren't together, and like it was like a
Hmm.
split, and that's hard to deal with. And I don't. You're right. I don't think we talk about that enough. We don't talk about how it affects our career. We don't talk about how it affects our
Hmm.
mental health, our spiritual health. Like, man, I still remember like when my parents split up, I stopped going to church. You
Hmm.
know, like and that took me away from my faith. And as I'm older now, like I'm tapping back into that on my own, and I'm just like, man, like when did I ever get disconnected? And it's like you just reminded me that that's what happened in my life. Like something traumatic happened that I got disconnected from so many things that I was so connected with when I did have my parents together. And it's like, when you look at those stats, you're like, how does that impact our future and like the generations coming into the workforce that are going to be impacting society?
Hmm.
And I'm just like, that's mind blowing. It's like mind blowing right now. I'm like, oh my gosh, my mind's everywhere. Like, what is that look like?
No, I mean it's true. It's an entire generation who their friends change all the time. They haven't been able to depend on
Yeah.
anything. You know, everything changes from friends
Hmm.
to unstable family situation to an iPhone every year. Like literally everything, even
Yeah.
on a consumer level, right? Like all those things. And
Yes.
and like what does that mean? Like where does stability even matter anymore, you know?
Hmm.
Or like keeping your word, you know?
Yeah.
Being uh being
Wow.
somebody that somebody can count on. You know, I'm not I think that's probably a foreign concept because fewer and fewer people have even experienced it.
Hmm.
You know,
So
that's just
true.
like that's crazy. So when I think about like your relationship with your brother, like that is something that is very, very special. You know,
Hmm.
extremely
And what's
special.
what's even funny is that he has been out of state for 10 years now. So
Hmm.
we haven't lived in the same state for since 2000. Oh, wow, 13 years now. Since 2010, I haven't, we haven't been in the same vicinity. So to have this relationship with someone that doesn't even live in your state or someone that's that accessible is that's a strong relationship in my opinion, and I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah. Is this the brother who runs?
Yes. This is the brother that's insane and runs 10 miles when he comes to Arizona during the summer. He is inspiring to say the least.
Yeah, yeah, because you said he'll cruise, like, because does he run Thunderbird? Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
And you're like, he'll
he's
just like
ran
cruise it.
Thunderbird. Yeah, and I'm over there dying, like can't even make it up the mountain. And he's like on his second lap. He's like, "Are you done yet?" And I'm like, "Are you serious?"
You're like, are you? No,
Yeah,
I could go all day.
yeah,
Are you done yet?
yeah. But it's that brother. So man, like we've been through a lot together. I'm appreciative for sure.
Yeah. Ah,
Mhm.
that's amazing. Like, what are you most excited about right now in your life? Like outside of like career, outside of like all of that, because there's been a lot of personal changes. Like, what are you most excited
Mhm.
about?
I'm happy that you asked that because I feel like I hadn't thought about that.
Hmm.
And I've been so focused on my career
Hmm.
that I've kind of put everything else on the back seat. And then like this is like a vulnerable, part of me that's gonna speak, but like even like putting fitness on the back seat, which you know me pretty well, like
Hmm.
that's something that's so important to me. And I think as you ask that question, I'm excited to see how I can actually fit all of that into my new work schedule,
Hmm.
and all the new things that I've been doing. But I don't know if you've heard of that thing where it says like it's pretty much called like the four burners, right? And in order to be extremely successful, you can only focus on one. You can only have one turned on. And to be somewhat successful, it's two. To be okay, it's three. And to be unsuccessful, you focus on all four.
Hmm.
And what all those burners stand for is one being your career, one's being family, and then one's being health. I forget what the other one was. But if you focus in on only one of those, you're going to be completely successful. And I feel like I've been focusing so much on my career that I have turned all those other burners off. Oh, the last one was friends.
Okay.
Was friends. So yeah. So family, friends, health, and career. And I really think I need to start balancing that out. And I've been working really hard these past 2 weeks to balance that out and to take time for myself, to take time for my family. Like this was the first weekend that I was able to really not think about work that much.
Hmm.
That much. I still thought about it. Not think about work that much and really just let go and have fun with my family and like live in the moment and be present. And that felt really good. I
Hmm.
was like, life isn't just about working. It's more than that. It's the community around you. It's the your family. It's the love that you surround yourself with. And I'm excited to see how I can incorporate all of that and still be successful in the things that I find to be success.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, like, one thing that I think is important with figuring to balance all of that out is recognizing
Mhm.
like different seasons call for different things,
Mm,
where it isn't going to be something that is static. There's going to be some seasons where career will need to be the thing that you focus on. And then there's going to be other seasons where,
mhm,
you know what, my family needs me. And so I'm willing to
mhm.
pull back on the career because family needs me, or, or even priorities, right? Priorities change. Like we're people, we experience,
Yeah.
different things. Like lately, with me, like my health has been a thing and has
Yes.
been like way
Mhm.
high on the priority lately, because if it wasn't, it would be bad. Um, but
Right.
like the ability to go, all right, what does the season call? What does the season call for? And for me, like
Yeah.
just again, like going spiritual, like what what does God have for me in this next season? Okay, that's going to
Mhm.
cause my priorities to adjust a little bit. Okay,
Yeah.
because where what he wants me to do, that's where the success is going to happen. That's where the most is going to happen. Because who was it? I forget, and I think I might have brought this up on another episode of the podcast. But there was a quarterback who like won the Super
Mhm.
Bowl, right? And when you're in football, you work to win the Super Bowl since you're a kid, right? Like you're dreaming
Yeah.
of holding the trophy, and you've sacrificed social life. You've so sacrificed all these things. Like you don't know who's
Mhm.
a real friend. You don't know, like you've chosen to live that life there for the sake
Mhm.
of greatness in what you want to do,
Yeah.
right? And he gets back to the hotel room after winning the Super Bowl and just goes like, so that was it. like like not in a bad way, but like in like a
Yeah.
now what kind
Mhm.
of way, like that. I
Because your purpose is
Yeah,
that.
I have it, but I still long for something else. It didn't feel a thing. And so like I still
Wow.
have this not emptiness, but it didn't give me what I thought it would, which isn't necessarily a
Mhm.
bad thing. It just means, okay, so what? Like what is that thing? And that's been a good perspective for me when particularly professionally. Like when
Mhm.
okay, so I get the promotion I want. Okay, so I make 500,000. Okay, so what now?
Yeah.
And if that's all it was, like you'll get disappointed very quickly when all of a sudden you have it, and you're just like, God, damn, like I was supposed to feel a lot more fulfilled than this, when
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
happens. Like, man, I thought having all my bills on auto pay was gonna make my stress go down. Like I was gonna
Yeah.
feel like I did something, like I'm worth something, and so understanding the burners, understanding what life calls
Yeah.
for at different moments, um, is tricky. It's not always hard, but you
Yeah.
definitely, like, it's not always easy, but you definitely know when it's off, when
Mhm.
they're not calibrated. And the sooner that
Yeah.
you can understand, okay, something's not right, I need to adjust, um, the better, because you won't regret it. You won't know,
Mhm.
you won't regret doing what you should be doing in that season.
Yeah. And you pointed something out is like being aware of like when they're off
Hmm.
and like knowing when to focus in on that. I think like for me, like I can feel it like sometimes, like if I'm not around my family a lot or not, talking to them as much as I should be, like I can feel the emptiness that like
Hmm.
something is off, right?
Hmm.
And something and like I use the term grounding myself because my family does ground me, my friends ground me going to the gym grounds me. So like understanding what you need in that moment is important. And I'm really proud of you for taking, like that season and like focusing on your health because like seeing you now, like you running your races now, like that's so inspiring. Like I love that you're doing that because I know that's something that you've loved to do since I met you. That was the one thing we connected on. I think that was the first thing we connected on is
Yeah.
like working out, going to the mountains, running the mountains. So I love to hear that you're in the space where like you feel good about your health and like you're happy and you're proud of yourself because that's the most important thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm like, we've talked about a lot.
Yeah, we
It's
have.
already. I'm like looking down. I'm like, whoa, we've been talking like about an hour already. That's
Yes, we
crazy.
have.
That's crazy. Oh, you're like, yeah, we have. all the things, all the things.
Yes.
Uh,
I feel like that can go on forever, you know.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We have that relationship.
For sure. For sure. Well, as we round the bend, I know that there are people who just don't have, I don't know if it's for some people it might be self-confidence. For some people it just may be fear. For other people it could be whatever. Like whatever it is, right? And they're just looking to be encouraged on doing the next step that they know needs to happen. They're not wrestling with it. They know what the right step is, and it could be from a career standpoint. It could be even something like, you need to get out of this relationship. Like,
Right,
that needs to happen. What would you tell them? Because they're going to be thinking, oh, that's great. You're brave, Bianca. Like, yay, you did it for you. Right. But I'm not sure that I can do
yeah.
that. What would you tell those people to tell them that, hey, if you could do it, they can too?
Um, really just get out of your own head. I think our biggest limitation that we have is ourselves. All the things outside of that don't matter because the ones making the decisions are us. So really just get out of your head. If you've thought about it and you've thought about it for a while, then that means you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that your body's probably telling you to do it too. If you have that gut feeling, listen to your gut feelings. Your intuition is very strong, and that's, I think, something that's like a God-given right. Our intuition is definitely a God-given right. So get out of your head and just, put that one step forward. You don't have to look 10 steps ahead. You just have to look at the step in front of you. If you can see your feet, you've got it.
Ah, I love that. I love that. Well, I have nothing to add to that. I just
Mhm.
thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. This was an honor.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
yeah. It was so much fun. And for those of
Yeah.
you who are listening, you know what to do with stories like people like Bianca who are taking risks and doing that. And maybe this is she told you this is one of the first times in her life that she's done something like this. If you want stories like Bianca's to get out there, please subscribe, leave a review, not because, oh, I need more subscribers. No, it's none of that. It's because if we want these stories to get out there, that's the name of the game in the podcast world. And so definitely do that. And you know what? While you're at it, do something this week to make yourself proud, okay?